Gurv Mágat, Las Cian O'Callaghan, and firstly I want to thank Aontas na Machlein and Éireann, Union Students in Ireland, for their work in this, and also want to thank Deputy Eoin O'Brien for his work in terms of bringing this forward. I want to welcome that the Government are letting this go forward to committee stage. That's very positive. I do have to say that there's been a lack of urgency on the Government's part in terms of dealing with this. If we continue at the pace the Government is going at in terms of dealing with this, we're going to be in a situation where most of the students who were penalised last year for complying with public health measures will actually, and I see the Minister for Housing is leaving the chamber while I'm making this point, but it's an important one, they will be left college by the point that this is actually dealt with at the pace that they're going at. I see the Minister for Housing is waiting and staying, so I thank him for. Well, I thank the Minister for his kind words. Now, I do want to say this: the Minister has agreed to implementing the best parts of the bill. So, can we be told which parts of the bill the Minister does not agree with and does not intend to implement? I think the Minister, from his words, seems to have formed a view on this. So, I think the House has a right to know which parts of the bill you think should be implemented and which parts you don't, if you formed a view on that. And I think it's only fair as well to the students and to Union Students in Ireland who've worked on this to know, because it is welcome that this is progressing to committee stage, but we should know what parts of the bill the Government actually think are worth implementing and which parts the Government has formed a view aren't. Or if there's challenges, we need to know what those challenges are as well.
That's what committee stage is for. But if I'm not, you maybe missed my opening statement.
No, I was there for your opening statement, Minister.
Deputy and Minister,
I'll give you a copy of it.
No, with respect, you have 10 minutes, Deputy, to make your statement. It's not an interactive process. So if you could use your time.
But you see, he'll play it like it is.
Please, thank you, Minister. Oireachtas, Lannerai.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think the Minister was trying to be helpful there with his intervention, so I thank him for that, and I appreciate that it will be done at committee stage, but I appreciate that it would be useful to have your view, your explicit view on that at present, so we know where we stand. And I want to thank the Minister for being willing to engage on that point. I do think the essence of this is that students and their families were penalised last year for following public health measures. And this should have been dealt with very urgently at that time, rather than it being left on students and their families having to lobby and in most cases being able to get improvements in this situation. But it should have been, as we were dealing with other things fast in terms of legislation, there should have been leadership from the Government at that point. I think other deputies have made the point that pre-charging is a huge burden on families and is very unfair, and that it does need to go. And this, at the essence of this is that students and their families should not be treated differently to other tenants and to other renters. That is deeply unfair. And we know that students have had, I know a lot of people have had a very tough year. Students have had a particularly tough year. Most of them studying from bedrooms, and that being, for a full year, that being their participation in college life has been very difficult. I also want to say I think this has to be part of and seen in terms of wider reforms that are needed to protect the rights of renters, and I welcome the Minister's comments on that, that he will be doing that. Renters in Ireland have faced some of the highest level of rent increases in the European Union over the last number of years. Rents have increased in Ireland by over 40% over the last 13 years, which is double the European average. We're now in a situation that rents in the capital city in Dublin for apartments are more expensive than any other capital city in the European Union. And that has happened over the last number of years under the watch of Fine Gael, supported by Fianna Fáil and the current Fianna Fáil-Fine Gael government. Part of this problem has been state payments to private landlords, which is supported to support low-income renters in insecure tenancies, but those payments are fast approaching the €1 billion mark. If the Minister is anxious to leave, that's fine. I'm not trying to delay you.
Cian.
Okay,
Carry on.
thank you. Yeah.
Always listen to you.
Yeah.
No, I'm going. I know
Look, an issue that was reported on this week, which is related to this, is that rents are now being artificially fixed. So the recorded rents are not being recorded properly. And actually, this needs to be addressed in the legislation that the Minister is talking about. And not only does this have implications in terms of rent pressure zones and potentially the 4% increase, those protections being undermined. It also has implications for the state in terms of long-term leases, because long-term leases, as the Minister knows, are being signed up to on the basis of market rents. And as we know from Freedom of Information documents released to me, we know that those market rents, in some cases, were not subject to independent evaluations. So that has to be tackled. I think what's happened to students and has happened in terms of housing and renting for students is part of a wider problem in terms of housing and renting being turned into a financial commodity in this country. We've seen that through the privatisation of emergency accommodation for people who've lost their homes. We've seen that in terms of long-term leasing of social housing, and we've seen reports this morning on investment portfolios being advertised to investors based on the guaranteed 25-year long-term leases that the government and the state is signing up to. We're seeing this in terms of apartments being bought up en masse by investment funds, and that's driving up rents and driving up the cost of housing, including for students. We've seen this in terms of the favourable tax treatment for these investment funds. We've seen this with the poor regulation. We've seen this with the high rents that indeed are being propped up because the state, when investment funds are not able to fill empty units and therefore do not lower their rents, what they do is they then sign up for a long-term lease with the state. And we've seen this through subsidies for developers through the shared equity scheme that the government is seeking to introduce. What we need, last can, in terms of this, is we need a referendum on the right to housing, and we need the wording on that to be agreed by government so we can move forward on that. We need to remove most grounds for evictions, as is the case in most other Northern European countries, and need to remove the situation where people can be evicted into homelessness, and we need a multi-pronged approach to this. In conclusion, last Cian O'Callaghan, I want to say I met with student representatives and representatives from Oireachtas Union of Students in Ireland earlier this year, and I was absolutely horrified by some of the real-life experiences and stories of some of those students who've been renting, the way they've been treated, the way they've been dehumanised, the way that they've been exploited. And it behoves all of us, all of us in this House, to ensure that that sort of exploitation of students, who often are at a vulnerable stage in terms of their development. It can be the first time that students have moved out of home. It can be, it can be a very daunting experience coming to college as a first year, and to hear of some of the terrible treatment and the trauma and anguish caused to young students who are heavily exploited, treated in a terrible way because there isn't insufficient protections in place for them. The mental health stress that they were put under at what should have been a really positive time in their lives. I think that should remind all of us that this is very important, that we urgently get this addressed. Gurmagat.